Hi, it's David here with DG Sessions. Hopefully you'll enjoy watching and learning Metallica's new track Screaming Suicide. A lot of work has gone into getting this to you as quickly as possible, so if you do get anything out of watching this, please consider clicking like and clicking subscribe below. Hopefully you'll enjoy it and I'll see you soon. First up we have our intro. In this intro section I've arranged two guitars for one tab, which means that the first half of each bar represents the rhythm guitar, which sounds a little bit like this. And the second half represents the lead guitar, which sounds a little bit like this. After those two bars, we run into the next section, which is a repeat of the very first bar on the rhythm and in the lead. After that we have a bar of 2/4, which can feel like it's rushing the song through a little bit, but it just sounds a little bit like this. And that's just played by the rhythm guitar. The lead guitar is holding on to that 7 from the previous bar. We get that repeated round, and then we're into a lead guitar section, which sounds a little bit like this. Those are the first two bars, followed by the second two bars like this. We've missed off the very last note there, just because that tends to overlap with the riff in the actual recording. So if you're playing it live, you'd miss that note and just head straight into the riff at that section. Next up we have what I would consider to be the main riff of the tune, and it goes a little bit like this. So that's the same bar 3 times in a row. And then finally at the end of the 4th bar we have this. This means the whole riff all in one goes. After our main riff, we're looking at our verse section. Now the verse repeats the same riff over and over again, which goes a little bit like this. And once more at full speed. and that repeats around 4 times to do the verse. Now we're into the pre-chorus section, which sounds a little bit like this. One more time. And that repeats around twice before we get to the chorus. Here we have the chorus riff of Screaming Suicide. It can be a bit tricky to get the timing on this, so listen very carefully. That's the whole part of the chorus. So let's take a look at that bar by bar. Here's the first bar. Next bar. Here we have the next bar after that, which is the same as the first one. And finally, our last bar on this page is a bar of 3/4, which is almost the same as our second bar, but just chops the end of the riff off, you can see there. After that, we're running into the next page, which runs into this section of muted strings, sounding like this. After that, we have an A5 power chord, followed by a run in a bar of 2/4 like that. One more time from the top, here we have the full chorus. If you follow the tab, you should be able to pick it up quite quickly. Next up we have a lead break, which is very reminiscent of the parts in the introduction. Here we go. And then the next 2 bars. Here's where things differ slightly. One more time on those second 2 bars. Next up we have the first in a couple of bridge sections, going a little bit like this. One of the easier riffs in the song, let's hear it up to full speed. Here we are into our first solo section. We're going to take a look at this one bar and one phrase at a time. So here's our first phrase slowly. One more time, a little bit quicker. Our next bar and our next phrase is going to be a slight development of that first idea. One more time, a bit quicker. Now our next bar is going to be a slightly improvised section using bends on the 3rd string 4th fret. There's a lot of bends going on. Don't worry too much about the rhythm. Don't worry too much about exactly how many to do. It's just 2 bars worth of bending followed by a finishing phrase and ending on the 4th fret of your 4th string. So if you take a look at that as an idea for the whole phrase, and then I'll play you something that would probably fit quite well in a live environment, in a live situation. So we want something like... anything that's going to last for sort of around 2 bars, using a lot of bends on the 3rd string 4th fret, finishing off with a slight phrase. Make sure you finish on the 4th fret of that 4th string, and then we can move into the next section. Here we have something a little bit more interesting, a repeated phrase using pull-offs on the 1st, 2nd and 3rd string. So first of all we have 4-2-0 on the G, then 5-2-0 on the B, and then 5-2-0 back on the high E. These are going to be played in triplets, so groups of 3. So we get it's our first bar, and the next part finishing off the phrase. So the whole thing there. One more time. That's the whole pattern, and then the whole phrase as it is in the solo. Almost to the final phrase in this solo. Up to the 16th fret. Followed by... so that's our first bar. And finishing off the whole solo with this phrase here. One more time. Here we are with our second solo section. We're going to start with our first 2 bars, which are then repeated for our second 2 bars in this section. So one more time, a bit quicker. One more time. That represents our first 4 bars in solo 2. On to the next page. Our next phrase goes like this. So here we have the tab for the first bar there, followed by the second bar there. Almost to the next section. We have a repeating phrase here. So we get that twice, one more time. And then we get a partial repeat of that. So that whole phrase there. And this takes us into an ascending lick, very similar to one used in off the Kill 'Em All album. So that phrase ascending there just goes up. And then at the end there we have a tremolo picked run right the way down the high E string. Now you can use just one finger, and or you can use Kirk Hammett's preferred method of just hitting random notes in a scale rundown. So and that finishes the second solo. Almost at the end now, we're into our very final bridge section, which starts off with a repeated pattern like this. Very similar to one of the sections that we had earlier in the tune, just repeated around a few times before we get to the next riff in this section, which goes a bit like this. Zoom out just a touch. There we go. This one, nice and simple. One more time. Nice and easy section there. This brings us round to a development of the riff we had earlier in the section, right at the beginning. A little bit slower. This repeats around a few times, but the very last time we have it, we have a slight alteration at the very end. And that takes us back into the very final chorus. So lastly, we have our outro section, which sounds a little bit like this. Let's take that through one bar at a time. This is all stuff that we've seen earlier on, but it's best to go over it just to make sure that the outro is clean and tidy. That represents our first bar, then our second bar goes like this. The third bar. which is the same as the first bar again, and our final bars right here. And that finishes off the song.